Hey, it's 11:40 The Bet, and as we get closer to the Raiders Week 9 matchup in Duval County as they take on the Jaguars, we need to get a better look at the team. So joining us, senior Jaguars reporter and a part of Westwood One's college football coverage with the golden voice, I must admit, JP Shadrick is on with us, brought to us by BetQL. Bet smarter and beat the books. Download your BetQL app today. Now for the Jaguars, it's been a 5-game losing streak. For the Raiders over here, we're not doing much better, but I'm kind of curious if you could give me like a gauge of the fan base and where they're at in Jacksonville with the team so far this season.
Well, first, it's great to be with you. Second, they're impatient, and it's been a long time around here. I mean, remember 2017, the AFC Championship game run? Well, that's 5 years ago now. That's a distant memory for this organization and for this fan base. So they finally got the franchise quarterback that they were hoping for, but he's not playing up to that standard right now. And I think that has a lot of people scratching their head in certain situations. They're throwing interceptions in goal-to-go moments. That's not ideal. The defense is giving it up in key moments late in the game. They've lost a lot of fourth-quarter leads this year. So all that combined has everybody a little bit on edge right now, I think. But it is the calming presence, at least so far, of Doug Peterson that's kind of kept everything together and close, and even in these games, I think, in the fourth quarter. So you can start with that. The locker room going in there this week, they feel like, hey, we're close. We're still there. There's 9 games to go. It's not ideal, and they're upset about losing the games, but they're not kind of packing up yet. There's still a lot of football to be played, and I think that's where the fan base has to maybe just tap the brakes a little and consider where they are and where they were a year and 2 years ago. Don't want to go back there again.
And absolutely, and you bring it up. I mean, even the last game versus the Broncos, 21-17. I think it was the Colts the week before, 23-17. A lot of close games starting the season 2-1. So I guess my question is, has that kind of been the storyline this season that sticks out to you most? Is these close games that this team's been in throughout the season?
Right, because the 2 wins are blowout wins. They didn't have to go down to play in the fourth quarter, and I think it was John Madden, but I'm guessing he's not the only one that said this. I mean, the only way, or it might have been Parcells, either way, the only way you learn how to win close games is to go win close games. There's no formula for it. There's no play on a blackboard you can put up there. You just got to go out there and experience it. And, for the offensive side, they took the lead in the fourth quarter last week. They've done that a few times this year, but 4 times this year the defense has failed to make a play. Either down the field in a coverage bust or something has happened, or they've thrown it, or the Giants ran 8 straight power plays to the right against them at one point in a 4-minute drive to kick a field goal to make it a 6-point, whatever it is, right? Or the Jaguars failed a yard short in that game too. It's a different scenario each week, and that's really the problem. Is if it was one thing, you'd address the one thing and fix it, but it's a handful of things, and halfway through, they're happy with what they're doing, I think, between the 20s, and it's just those key moments late and in the red zone right now that's a problem.
And you touched on it a little bit earlier when we started the interview about Doug Peterson, and I guess my question to you is, has he brought stability as a head coach to this team? Because it's been well documented in the past with others that have been in that position as the head coach of the Jaguars.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. The guy's been in the league since 1991. Start with that. He was a player. He was an assistant coach in the league. Of course, was the head coach of the Eagles and won a Super Bowl. So he's seen it from all angles. So that also means he understands how to speak to all levels and what that means when the head coach talks to somebody at a different level of the organization and what that should feel like. So that didn't exist around here, let's say, last year, at least on the NFL level. So that's changed. That's number one. And then how he interacts with the quarterback and the offense and calls the plays and does all that. That's secondary to it also. And it's a big deal to have a guy. It's just nothing phases him. They've lost 5 in a row. Yes. The quarterback's not playing well at the goal line. Yes. The defense is giving. Okay, we can work on these things. It's not the end of the world. We're not going to bench everybody. We're not trading people away. They got to work through it, and that's the calm demeanor, at least on the outside of Doug Peterson. I think inside that head of his, there's a lot of frustration, but he's the kind that's not going to show it publicly and show up as players.
And that's good as the head coach. And one of these aspects that I'm looking forward to on Sunday is for both of these teams, the running backs. Josh Jacobs has been on a hell of a run up until last week versus the Saints when the offense was completely non-existent as they got shut out 24-0. But then for you guys as well, Travis Etienne, I'm looking at the stats. It seems like he's having a hell of a year. I'm assuming he's doing so good. That's why the team was comfortable saying, hey, we're going to let go of James Robinson and we'll trade him. For you, could you kind of let us know how he's been so effective this season?
It's a style, and it fits with the way they want to call plays. They're not going to be between the tackles power running attack. That's not what they are. They're getting him out in space. He wants to bounce it some and try to find that space, because once he's outside, he has the ability to make a 4-yard gain into a 9-yard gain, and then a 9-yard gain into a 50-yard gain. Can't really do that with a lot of traffic between the tackles. So I think that's why James Robinson is what he is, and he's a good running back. But for this scheme and what they wanted to do, it just wasn't going to be a great fit, I think, in the long run moving ahead. So good for both sides. James gets to go to a place where he can play, and then Travis Etienne ascending to the top of the offense here. And he's hot. I mean, his 4 straight games over 100 scrimmage yards, so they use him in the passing game too to get him out in space. And then last week on the ground was his best career day. He just ran differently. He ran with great pad level, and he had some issues with that early in the season where he was getting hit and going head over heels, and it was not going well. I think he's just trying to find his way. He didn't play last year in the NFL. So we're now 8 games into it for him, and 4 starts, I guess, coming up. His 4th official start coming up this week against the Raiders. It's only going to get better, I think, for Travis.
And you brought up Trevor Lawrence and some of the problems getting this team to score, and even versus Denver, there's been a couple turnovers. We're at you right now. If I have to ask you, or I will ask you, to evaluate his performance these past 2 seasons, his first 2 in the NFL.
I think you throw out last year. It's everything that was going on with Urban Meyer and the coaching staff and everything around this team. It was not the great situation for him to learn how to figure out how to play NFL quarterback. So
Absolutely.
I know you can't do that. There were 17 games that were played, but now considering it now, I think the coaching staff this year almost considers him a rookie. They're still having to kind of teach him the ways of certain things during the week, and then on game day, making situational decisions. Doug Peterson was a quarterback. He gets it. He understands it. That's why he has that conversation with Trevor. And I don't think that existed as much in the past year. So he's still learning, and it's what it is. And it can be frustrating, but you can only learn if you play. We've had phone calls on our, post-game call-in show, and let me tell you, it's an interesting show some weeks, that they wanted to sit him down. No, you cannot sit the guy down. I mean, unless he's throwing 4 picks a game or something and it's not even close, okay. These are mistakes that you can fix. And he's doing some other things that not a lot of other guys in the league can do too. So that's where he is right now.
Yeah, and you got to play through it, and you kind of, you got to learn. It's 11:40. The Bet Senior Jaguars reporter JP Shadrick joining us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the deadline. Of course, you guys made a huge move, although we're not going to see the results for it up until next year. But trading for Calvin Ridley, obviously Calvin sat out the season in Atlanta, and then the suspension happens as well. Where are you guys at with getting Ridley and adding him on with Christian Kirk, and just giving more pieces to Trevor to have to be successful?
Oh, it's a huge step for next season, right? And for Trent Baalke, the general manager, he's always kind of future focused, looking ahead to see what he can do to help this team. And they had conversations about this, I think, all offseason about what they could do. So, okay, they pulled the trigger on it. And it won't help anything this year. He won't be reinstated at least until February of 2023. That's when he can apply for reinstatement. But I would guess they've done their homework, knowing that he's going to at least come back at some point. So that's a good sign. Now, is his head on straight? That's another fair question, because he had some issues last season where he didn't want to play, apparently. So, okay. Has he figured that part of it out? I think that's a big question. We won't know the answer to that until he shows up for the offseason program next year, if he's around and ready to go. But if he is, and if he's to that form he was the year before, look out, because the missing piece for this offense right now is a true number 1 deep threat type that can run routes, that can do everything you want. And you put him with Christian Kirk at the slot, and then Zay Jones running on the other side, and Evan Ingram, if he comes back, it's a 1-year deal right now for the tight end. Then you've got a formidable group of receivers. So, okay, but they're not giving up on this season yet, right? It was the deadline. Yeah. They had to make the move for the deadline. They did it. It didn't cost them anything on the cap this year. They still have 9 games to go this year that the team is focusing on, but they're also building ahead for the future.
I also forgot this is the Zay Jones revenge game. Yeah. It wasn't the Hall of Fame game. It's this one. So Raiders fans should be scared. I do want to ask you for Raiders fans and everyone listening, what they should look out for the Raiders to attack the Jaguars if the Raiders want to win. But before we get to that, I'm kind of curious, obviously with you covering the Jaguars and not focusing day in and day out on the Raiders, a lot of upset people over here too. Our post-game shows are very interesting as well with all the expectations. Team goes to the playoffs last year. They get Devonta Adams. They get Chandler Jones. But from the outside looking in, what do you think about this Raiders team and the weird 2-5 start that they've had with the new head coach?
I think that the running game can travel if Jacobs gets back on form. Last week was just an odd game in the Superdome. I don't think that's what the Raiders are. They have too many good players on the team for that to be a week-over-week issue. I think that was just a one-off, didn't have it together, whatever happened in the Superdome, some voodoo in New Orleans, whatever it is, just let it stay there, right, if you're a Raider fan. Derek Carr, I liked Derek Carr a lot when he came out. It was the same draft as Blake Bortles, remember? So the Jaguars were going to pick a quarterback that year. Carr came through in one of his pre-draft visits. Actually, most of the quarterbacks came on the same day. And that year, they allowed us to talk to all those guys on Jaguars.com, which is kind of funny. But I really liked his personality, his demeanor. It just got a little toughness to him. He kind of feels like a Raider, right? I mean, the guy's been through it a little bit. He's been battered and bruised and signed a new deal. And they got to the playoffs somehow, and he was a big piece. And I like Carr. I know that he's getting up there. It's his 9th year. But you put a weapon with Adams with him and then a running game to go with it. I think this can be a good team still, and they might can find a way. It's a tough division to have to climb back out of the cellar though, obviously. But that running game, especially coming off a shutout, you want to get back to something that your bread and butter. There's something that's going to work.
Yeah.
And the run game can work. They proved that for about 3 weeks in a row before the shutout. I feel like that's what they're going to have to get back to.
And would you say that's the key part in for Raiders fans trying to pull out a W and get to 3-5 against the Jags?
Well, I mean, the Jaguars defense has been pretty good against the run this year. They've had a couple of exceptions. The Philadelphia game when the Eagles ran for over 200 on them in the cold rain up in Philly. And then the fourth quarter of the Giants game just a few weeks ago when the Giants at will just ran the clock out basically and won the game. Other than that, they've been okay. They've made some additions in the offseason to fix the run defense and defensive tackle, linebacker, and so far, so good. So that's the trick. The issue, as we talked about, defensive situational problems in the pass game have plagued this Jaguars defense. So, yeah, they can stop the run all day, but when it comes down to it, teams going up against them trying for a game-winning drive, and they throw it over the top against man coverage on Trey Herndon or Shaq Griffin, who's banged up right now. But, for example, that's happened, and that's been a problem. So is it Adams getting covered by Tyson Campbell, the top corner? Is it somebody else in coverage on another guy? Can the Jaguars defense stop that big play in a big moment? Because I think they'll be able to handle most everything else. At least they've shown that in most of the games. It's just that final 4 minutes, it falls apart.
And before we get you out of here, like I said at the beginning, you're also a part of Westwood One in the college football coverage. You'll be on the call. I'm very jealous. You'll be on the call. Game of the week, Tennessee versus Georgia. Number one, how do you see that game playing out? And number two, speaking of two, I feel like it happens every year, but I'm assuming two of the SEC teams are going to make the college football playoff, whether it's Georgia, Tennessee, or Alabama. Out of that triple threat, who do you see making it into the playoff at the end of the season?
Well, you say Alabama, they've got to beat LSU first. They're up against it. That's never an easy game the way LSU's playing right now, especially in Baton Rouge. That's a hostile environment when it gets dark, and it will. It'll be a night game. So Alabama's got them. They got Ole Miss. I mean, they got That's tough coming
It's
up.
the gauntlet.
Auburn's got nothing to play for, but they can beat Bama and make their season even without a head coach. So,
Real quick. Can you believe Cadillac Williams is taking over for head coach of Auburn? I feel so old. I just got to say that. I feel so old.
It's funny you say that.
In Tampa, they still sell his jersey. Like, despite the Super Bowl, they still sell his jersey.
I was a student at the University of Alabama walking from my apartment next to the stadium to school one day when the public address announcer said, now at running back, Carnell Cadillac Williams, because he was on a recruiting visit. He was recruited by Alabama, and he was being introduced and walked out of the tunnel that day. He ended up at Auburn. The rest is history, of course, and now he's the head coach at Auburn, and we'll see what happens with that down the line. He's not going to get the full-time job, but he is a legend in that place for sure. It's been a rough go for that program. Now, to Tennessee and Georgia, Tennessee's offense is unbelievable. The way they've spread it out, kind of make you sneak up, lull you to sleep on defense. Oh, they're going to throw wide. We got to cover 53 yards wide. We've got to stop the run because they'll hand it off a couple times. And then, hey, you creep up those safeties and whoop, there he goes over the top, and he doesn't miss. Hooker doesn't throw it into problems, but Georgia can create problems. They're good on defense at the corner spot. They're really good on the defensive line. Can they push the middle of the pocket up front of him? Jalen Carter, I think, will have a big hand in this game in doing that if they can get in the face of Hooker and bother him, because I don't know how much that's really happened so far this season. That's huge. Georgia's offense, hey, they can run the ball. I mean, they've got 4 running backs that can do it. They've got 2 really good tight ends that can play. They don't have a top-tier down-the-field deep threat receiver. That's just not who they are. So I don't think they want to get in a shootout with Tennessee. I think it's Georgia wanting to run the ball, take some time off the clock, keep Hendon Hooker on the sideline sipping Gatorade. If Tennessee wants to score every possession, that'd be the best thing they can do, because they don't think Georgia can keep up with it. I think it's a fantastic football game. The environment is going to be electric. It's the toughest ticket ever in Athens. This will top the Notre Dame game from 2019 when the Irish went there for the first time ever and were ranked pretty highly. This is different level because the winner has command of the East and the SEC championship game berth most likely. And then, of course, the playoff implications that go with it. It's the biggest game in this rivalry's history, the biggest game in Sanford Stadium history. And you'll hear it on Westwood One starting at 3 o'clock Eastern time with a pregame on Saturday between the hedges.
It may be airing on our competitors here in Las Vegas, but that doesn't matter.
Thanks.
That doesn't matter. We show love to JP regardless. Raiders, Jaguars, of course, this Sunday as well. We had to get the inside scoop from the Jaguars from senior Jaguars reporter JP Shadrick. JP, we appreciate the time and the and all the insight. Thank you very much, sir.
If you continue to have a show after this interview, I'd love to be back on it again. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, JP. Take care.